Hi everyone, welcome to week 5. It is rough draft return week. Woo woo. And the celebratory part of that, of course, is that you actually completed a rough draft, hopefully. So let's go ahead and take a look at what you can expect for this week. Yes, you will get your rough drafts hopefully by tomorrow. I'm working on that, finishing that. And then again, we're continuing our reading about language, specifically this week, the power of language and kind of how that plays into our thinking. We have another writing territory, and this is the last week of conferences for essay number 1. We also will have an optional peer revision, which I'll explain a little bit once we get into that. So here are your due dates. Again, most of everything happens towards the latter part of the week, except for this very first discussion board, which takes place on Tuesday. All right, let's go ahead and dive in. Again, as I've mentioned, I always post the page that provides the assignment in each module. So this is the same thing that you've been seeing week after week. I mentioned this in the announcement when I was talking about the about kind of how the rough draft feedback was trickling in, but do keep in mind that the feedback is in 2 places, right? It's actually on your Google Doc as comments, and then it's in the Canvas comment box. So I try to put like targeted feedback on the essay itself. Like as I'm noticing it, I'll kind of put some comments, but then the general overall feedback is in the Canvas comments box. So make sure that you're seeing both. When you see the little blue indicator that you have something graded there, because your rough draft is 5 points, I won't put the points in until I've given you feedback. So as soon as you see that, you know you've got feedback to look at. The peer revision is optional, and the reason that I made it optional is because some students really love peer revision, right? And they like doing it. They like getting feedback from peers. But other folks just don't like it at all. They don't want anybody else reading their essay. They don't want anybody else giving feedback. And so I've just started making peer revision optional. Those of you who want to have someone read and give you feedback, then what I want you to do is post your link. And I kind of walk through how to change your your access from viewing to commenting so that people can just give you comments on it and you don't run the risk of someone accidentally deleting your whole essay. So kind of, if you are interested in that, go through the process of changing your viewing status from editing to commenting, or you could just do viewing, but then they can't write little notes on it. Again, it's just an opportunity for you. But let me say this. Even as an adult now, even with like new assignments that I'm writing, or if I have to write a report for campus or something, I always have someone else look over it. I think it's honestly one of the best things that you can do. And part of that is because I think sometimes we need validation, right? We need to hear someone say, oh, this makes sense, or I understand what you're saying, or we need some constructive criticism, right? We need someone to say, I do not understand where you're headed here. And you want someone else to tell you that first before the teacher tells you that, and it's associated with the grade, right? So I absolutely encourage you to swap papers. If you don't end up doing it with anybody in this class, I know because we're not face-to-face, you can't really meet each other, then do it outside of class, right? With friends, someone you know, someone you trust, someone who's not going to take a red pen to your paper and edit. That's not what you want. You want someone who's going to give you feedback on the overall flow of your paper, where you can say, does this make sense, what I'm trying to say here, right? Because again, you don't want me to be that sole person, okay? All right, there's I'm off my soapbox about peer revision. I would encourage you to do it, but it's not required. It's not extra credit. It's not worth points. It's just for the value of doing it. But here are the steps for participating if you choose to do that. Okay. As I mentioned, this is the last week for conferencing. Here are the steps for how to do that. If you decide that you absolutely need to meet next week, then send me an email and we can try and work something out. We are now, of course, in the final revising stages of your essay. So now is the time to start writing your introduction and your conclusion. I'm a strong advocate of writing those last. I think too many students get stuck in just trying to figure out how to best open the paper when they don't have the body of the essay written yet. That's backwards, right? You want to write the body of the essay first. You have a general sense of where you're going. Then you know how to introduce it, right? Otherwise, it's like you're introducing something and you don't have any idea of what's going to follow. The same thing with the conclusion paragraphs. I really, really like this textbook page. And it kind of gives you the rundown of what they call intros and outros. And because we learn this super formulaic pattern of writing an introduction paragraph and then the conclusion paragraph restating the thesis and restating the main points. And if you know exactly what I'm talking about here, it gets to be kind of formulaic and kind of boring, right? And so I think that this textbook page does a really good job of trying to help us see the introductions and the conclusion paragraphs in a different light, like in a more holistic light, in a way that might make your paper matter even to you a little bit more. So I would encourage you to read through this. Your next textbook page is a reminder about using evidence. Depending on where you landed with English 100, you may have learned the pie format, or the ICE format, or the quote sandwich, or the SQIE, or. I feel like English teachers have a bunch of acronyms when it comes to evidence. So anyway, this page will give you a really good rundown and review of just basically how to integrate source evidence into your writing. And I love it because it's clear. It's like, you want to use a colon? Here's how to use a colon. You want to introduce it and embed it in your sentence? Here's how you do that. You want to use the square? Like, it just explains everything really clearly, and it's only one page, added bonus. So review this because you do need to make sure you are integrating your sources correctly. This also will kind of remind you how to cite. Okay. Last but not least, it's just some of Miller's tips about revising. You have all of this week. Your essay isn't due until midweek next week, so you've got plenty of time to revise. But these are just some general tips that I have for revising. Doing a backwards outline, reading it out loud, taking a break from your draft so you don't hate your essay. Proofreading should be the very, very last thing that you do. You can do it as you go, but for the most part, that editing piece is something that happens at the end. And then we move into the readings. So the first one is, there's 2 readings, but don't be put off by that because the second reading literally is like a paragraph long. The first one is Linguistic Terrorism, which comes from Gloria Anzaldua's work, Borderlands. And it's, this idea of language and kind of terrorism, and it speaks to this bigger idea of power and language, right? Which a lot of you seem to be writing about with your rough drafts, which I think is why you'll be interested in the second reading. Excuse me. Literally, it's like a paragraph here, but it talks about the power that language has and why it has that kind of power. So if that is something that you wrote about in your rough draft, then I would absolutely encourage you to read this because even for me, it just made me stop and really think about words. Your discussion board, their first discussion board it pulls a quote from Anzaldua's writing and asks you to think about this idea of linguistic terrorism and kind of what even that phrase means and kind of how you might unpack it. So the one caveat I have was that, I'm asking you some really big questions here, but I want you to kind of think even for yourself about the power of language. Then the next is the reply. Don't forget to reply. That will pop up on your to-do list. The second reading is going to be a hypothesis, and it comes from an online reader called The Conversation. And I found this article actually last year, and I was just fascinated by it. The article is called The War Speak, Permeating Everyday Language Puts Us All in the Trenches. And I just kind of accidentally found this article when I was looking for something else, and it really made me stop and pause and think for myself about how I use some of these words without even really thinking about the fact that I'm talking about war. So anyway, I won't go say much more about it, but it really did make me stop and think. And and I wanted to bring it into this conversation about language because I think it speaks to like some of the undercurrent of language that we are really not even thinking about. So I wanted to bring it in for that reason. As with the previous hypothesis readings, I would encourage you to read this separate from the actual hypothesis, so that way you don't kind of get buried in the hypothesis activity while you're trying to read it. So again, same kind of format as last time. You're going to be completing 5 posts. 4 will have a tag, what you learned, what's affirming for you, what's challenging for you, and what is a question for you. And then you're going to go back in and respond to someone's question. I love these hypothesis conversations that y'all are having. It's really, really good and in depth. And I'm especially looking forward to seeing what you have to say about this article. And then there, of course, is your reminder to post to your hypothesis. The mentor text this week is all about short paragraphs. And you might say, well, Miller, what is that? Just read through it. It's just a tool that you can use to really effectively effectively affect the reader, right? To cause your reader to kind of stop. And you can see that in our readings for this week, some of the writers that you've already read have done this, right? So if you want to see what that looks like in action, take a look at that. The mentor text repeats this same sentence, but you don't necessarily have to do that. I think it can be a really effective way to do it, but I'm not looking for repetition here. I'm looking for you trying to repeat a word or a phrase, a short paragraph, in a way that's really intentional. So again, kind of read through, choose one of the readings. Let me see if I can scroll back up. Choose one of these readings and see if you can just go search for that short paragraph and see what it does for you. What effect did it have on you as the reader? That's what I want you to try this for this week. Writing territory number 5, again, please make sure that you are highlighting your mentor skill. And then you have one extra credit opportunity this week. It is an article by Tania Maria Barrientos, Se Habla Español. And she's kind of talking about her identity and language. So the question here is, for you, how is your identity connected to language? And then that's it. You are on the home stretch with essay number 1, and yeah, then you're golden. So again, sign up for a conference if you want to. It's an assignment, so if you don't, you just don't get the points. It's up to you. I have student hours this week, so feel free to come in during student hours. If those times don't work for you, let me know. We'll figure something out. Otherwise, be in touch. Let me know if you need help. I'm here to help you. Week 5. We're finishing up the first essay, so take a deep breath. You're doing great.